What's up, everybody? Welcome to Sit Down. I'm DJ Sixsmith. We got some great guests in the house. Adam Gussow, Scott Balcarek. Guys, how are you?
Great to meet you.
Great to meet you, too.
Nice to meet you, man. Thank you.
First of all, Satan and Adam, congratulations on the documentary. A whole wild process to put this whole thing together. Your story is just incredible. So, first of all, thank you guys for coming in. And
it's great.
It was just a wonderful documentary. And for somebody like me who had no exposure to your story whatsoever, you did a great job in telling it. So why don't you first start out how you guys first came together with everything?
Well, it was 1992. A friend of mine took me out to see them. I had been editing another film about a street singer in Pittsburgh, which ended up doing really well. It was my friend's film, won the Student Academy Award, and a couple other friends. I'm a musician. So that's the first thing is I'm a musician, and they dragged me out to see. You got to see these guys, and they didn't tell me who it was and everything. And I remember walking in the bar, paying the fee, and I heard the band, and I was like, oh, this is a really big sound. You know what I mean? And I turned the corner, and instead of expecting to see 5 people, I just see 2. And it's the 2 people that seemingly come from completely different worlds. It kind of didn't make sense, but the music did. It was an amazing, amazing sound. At the idea, when I was there, I had this idea that they would be like sort of allegory. They were an allegory for American music, the white guy, the black guy. I know that sounds a little embarrassing, but I was really young, and you know, I was you know, studying, and I was sort of like, they're an allegory.
Yeah, I mean, from that perspective, from a musical perspective, I mean, Adam, you're just rolling on the street in Harlem, and you stumble upon this guy. I mean, what prompted you to actually stop and play?
Here's the thing. So the film starts with me kind of. Gussow has a broken heart, lost a girlfriend as a grad student. Next day, he's walking through Harlem, narrative compression. So I'd actually had a couple of years. I'd had a teacher in New York, an African-American guy named Nat Riddles, who was a Bronx New Yorker, who was a great street blues harmonica player. I followed him in the summer of '85. I was a busker in the streets of New York. By the time, and then I'd also played in the jazz clubs in Harlem. I'd had, in the spring of '86, over in Europe for 2 months as a busker. So by the time I showed up on the street in Harlem in the fall of '86, I was sort of primed, I was ready, and then I see this guy. Scott says, you know, Scott's a guitar player. When he walked into that bar in '92,
I got it too.
An incredible guitar player who's also an incredible one-man band playing cymbals, and I'm just playing harmonica. When I came across him, he was playing guitar, incredible guitar, not incredible percussion. At that point, it was just one hi-hat cymbal.
Yeah.
He still hadn't gotten the 2-cymbal thing, and I see this guy, and I get out of my car. I never really spent much time on the street in Harlem until that point. I got out of my car and I parked it, kind of like, okay, and who is this guy? And I asked a guy standing there, he goes, oh, him? He goes, that's Satan. Everybody in Harlem knows Satan. And I went home and wrote that line down because it's such an unusual thing to hear. And my name being Adam, I literally thought, Satan Adam. Now, we didn't call ourselves that for the first 4 years.
What did you guys call yourselves?
Nothing. Because we didn't have what we call an indoor gig. We were like street musicians. We didn't need it. We didn't have a CD or a cassette to sell.
Wasn't it sort of, they called you,
it was Mr.
Satan and the white guy or something?
The
white boy, right.
And the white boy who plays with Mr. Satan up by the phone store in Harlem. That was,
I seem to remember that.
We didn't have a corporate name. It sounds kind of strange. These days, you'd have a YouTube channel.
Right. Well, that's the thing that I'm thinking. It was so pure and organic. But if you were to do it in 2019, people would get you on their phones. You'd be on Instagram. You'd be on YouTube. But it was actually
there was none of that.
Yeah,
so there was no visual technology like that.
Yeah.
So like at one point, so the U2 guys who came along in the summer of '87, our first summer. By that point, he had his hi-hat cymbals. He had built a thing to be on top of. He got rid of that soon, but he was like a wooden kind of thing. And they came along. But that didn't even come out. Rattle and Hum, which had 39 seconds of us doing a song called Freedom for My People, came out in the fall of '88. And we'd had one local TV thing, Ramey Blumenfeld caught us. So very little in the way of, like, we're just playing. Yeah,
that was an interesting thing for me too, is when I get asked questions in festivals about like, wow, it's so amazing that they met, and you're right, that wouldn't have happened now because of social media. But I think that's I like that.
Under the radar.
Yes, but I like that about the movie though, that Adam actually broke through a barrier that used to exist and kind of doesn't exist because we don't really do that anymore. We don't meet people that way.
No,
you know, we might meet them on social media. You know what I mean? And that, you know, so it's an interesting thing. I never really thought about making the movie, but as social media got bigger and bigger and bigger, I started in '95.
By the time Scott started filming us in the fall of '95, I think it was, at the Decade in Pittsburgh. So it was a club. And we were playing a gig for the American Studies Association because I'd gone back to graduate school at that point. So we play at the Decade, and he comes in. That's 9 years after he and I had started playing. So Sterling and I had 9 years. So when the documentary So you had that. So
I saw you in '92. Yeah,
you saw us in '92.
Yeah.
We started filming in '95, and it took 23 years from 1995. But you had to back and fill that first 9 years, and I'm fascinated by how you managed to
I was really
assemble
interested in that,
stuff.
just the old footage, because it's not like you had a huge amount of footage to dive into with these guys. So how did you go about piecing the photos and the video together?
Well, so I used news footage, and then we found some footage that Adam gave me a lot of footage, like his cousin shot on the street.
Like a camcorder, or what were you
Totally, it was Super VHS,
Wow.
or not even that. I don't even know what it was. It was so old. But so funny, it looks good in this weird like '80s way.
It's just like, it's perfectly suited for this story.
Exactly,
you know?
yeah. So there was that, there was news footage there, and then there was, but there was someone who actually captured Sterling around the time that he was playing, but when Adam saw him, and it might have been before Adam was even there. I'm not exactly positive about that. But anyways, that was really old footage, and he had that. And then I started shooting in '95 when Harlem still was the Harlem of old.
Right, not the gentrified Harlem.
And that was 16 millimeter.
Yeah.
And then there was a lot of just calling people, finding footage. There's a lot of services, you know, that you could find footage. And I sort of like put that all together, power of technology. I mean, the stuff you can do now in post. And, you know, it sounds like, not that I'm lying or anything, or not that I'm, but basically I wanted people to feel like what it felt like when Adam walked into that neighborhood. Because for younger people, they would never know.
No.
You know, they would never know. So.
I think the hard thing to communicate to people is how what seems like a very unlikely pairing could become kind of an everyday thing. In other words, I didn't go every day, but probably 3 times a week I'd go down after lunch. He'd stop playing, he'd have his crowd. He'd stop playing, he'd clean up, hey, I see Mr. Gussow's here. He'd clean up the money bucket, he'd take a cigarette break, and then I'd set up my mouse amp, or my 2 mouse amps. He had mouse amps. We both, New York street musicians in the 80s, had that kind of thing. And then we'd start playing. And of course, the very first day I played, there was this minor sensation. Who is this kid, kind of like, and is Satan going to wipe the sidewalk with him, which he almost did. I mean, he was incredibly powerful. From the first day, I recognized who I'm playing with. And I say in the documentary, I mean, it's the greatest gig a young white blues harmonica player could have, from my perspective. Partly because you're playing in a black community context where people are giving you feedback. And so one lesson I learned early on is I was very intent on sort of getting a sound, getting that real sound that Nat Riddles had taught me how to make. But what people didn't care about was showing off. It didn't. And so what you could tell when you were doing something right, because the crowd would suddenly accrete. They'd suddenly sort of, people would stop. And that happened when he and I were grooving really deep and strong. So the moment I kind of we had no rehearsals. That's the other thing. I am being forced to adapt to everything he does. And he is an amazing original musician. He's not a typical blues musician. He didn't bend strings the way guys did. He had wound 3rd string. He had jazz strings. Mississippi guy, but with sort of like incredible funk. I've talked about it, like funk guitar going.
He almost was playing like bass guitar, and
well, like
he had a style he used to call his three octave sound.
Well, nobody can copy.
That no one could copy.
Robert Johnson of his time. I have to say this.
He really is.
He is. Nobody. Other guitar players, really good guitar players, would come up.
2 musicians. I noticed it right away.
They would say, what kind of tuning is he using?
Yeah.
And I'd say,
even the edge in the movie.
Well, that's the thing. The edge
was like, what is he doing? You know.
So he's a genius level guitar player, and then incredible sort of soul blues singer.
I want to say though too that when Adam, a couple guys in the street when I was filming, they told me, and I think you might even disagree with this.
What'd they say?
But because they said he never, Mr. Satan never let anyone else play with him.
Well, I did go away with the Broadway show.
But many people, many people said that.
And he said, "I'll hold your spot."
Well, he knew what he had in you also. So as much credit as you give him, like you were the perfect partner for him, because you're playing part therapist and friend, and also a great partner as well. I mean, you hit on a lot of different levels there.
Well, there's also something that's really important to say, and I was thinking about this. As a harmonica player, I had training in traditional kind of blues harp style. So if I can,
absolutely, please.
The sort of James Cotton. By the same token, I had been showed a technique that no other harp players were using, no blues harp players were using, called overblowing, where I can do things like.
Wow.
So I was listening to Houston Person and Maceo Parker and sort of blues jazz sax players and starting to copy their licks. Sonny Rollins, you know, and Sterling was totally dedicated to as deep as he was in the blues, as representative of blues figure as he is, he was totally into, can I say, he said the hardest thing in the world, man, is to find your own sound. So he was into being original. He said, I don't sound like anybody else. I don't want to sound like anybody else. For a young white blues harmonica player who might, and you know, the white guys who play blues harp kind of want to play like Little Walter.
Sure.
Yeah. He busted me out of that so quick and hard. It's like, sound like you. And again, older men would come up. And they wouldn't say, get out of here, white boy, we don't want you playing our music. They'd say, you got to sound like you. They'd get your own sound.
So he nurtured that in you, and I think that,
but the community nurtured too, because individuality. You don't want to sound like everybody else. You want to have your own sound, and that was a thing in the clubs.
Right. So when I first saw them, you can tell instantly they had this unique sound. It was a perfect synergy. I remember thinking it was like some kind of beautiful cacophony because there was a lot of stuff going on. You know, but it wasn't. Of course, it wasn't noise. Right. But it was just amazing that it all gelled together.
I would say, how about a hand for the band? Like when we were out in the world. Once we got out in the world, I'd say, how about a hand for the band? He'd say, how about a hand for the rest of it?
Right. Yeah.
So he was a one-man. He's the greatest. I challenge anybody. The greatest one-man blues band America's ever had. Yeah. I mean, I've said that more than once, but I just come and show me somebody who's better.
I mean, he just had
I will
gift.
Admit I'm wrong.
He really did.
He did. He was like a funk machine.
It was insane. Yeah. It really was.
Yeah.
Just remarkable. And you guys had so many different really critical points, whether it was the Rattle and Hum, whether it was performing in Central Park, the New Orleans Jazz Festival. How did you guys build this thing out, and what, for both of you, what do you think was the really key moment in taking this thing to the next level?
Do you mean the moment in the
musically
of the documentary?
Yeah,
or do you mean
it can be musically and also for the doc.
Well, I have my own, but go ahead.
There's a couple of key moments. So, and actually, the U2 thing is not in a weird way, although it's a talking point.
Sure, but it's lower on the radar.
It's lower on the radar, and so one of the key moments, and it's one that Scott, I think, wisely foregrounds, although it's not a representative moment, is the moment it's actually 2 weeks. It was the summer of '89. It was 2 weeks after Do the Right Thing came out, when I got hassled by two guys. A guy came up and called Mr. Satan names, which since nobody ever disrespected him, it's like, what happened? Later somebody said, those guys are from Brooklyn, you know, not from Harlem. Nobody in Harlem would do that. But they said, why is this white boy playing with you? And it was, again, it's very unrepresentative. I think white friends of mine might have assumed that I would be greeted with that kind of thing, but we didn't. That was not the general reception. But that one time, and it scared me, and it woke me up, made me think. And in the film, I say, like, why should I assume that I could play with him and never risk anything to play this music? Why should I assume? Harlem's a safe place relatively, but it's, you know, if
anything can happen.
Because this was a period of time, and I think this is so crucial. Some people who were there remember. It started with Howard Beach in December of '86. So we'd been playing together for a couple of months, and then suddenly that happened. And I remember going on the street after that happened, and nobody took it out on me. We would talk about that crap out in Queens that had happened out in Queens, where Michael Griffith was killed, kind of being chased out of a pizzeria. It was basically an Italian neighborhood. Which
I think was the basis for Do the Right Thing, or one of those stories was.
It could have been, and of course Yusuf Hawkins.
Maybe it was Yusuf Hawkins,
got killed, and when that happened, I exiled myself. I basically said, and he said, my people are really upset, you probably shouldn't. And I said, I don't want to. I'm going to stay away for a little while. And then I went back. But when those guys hassled me, the decision was, I've been here for a couple of years. I've had a really good run of it. Do I take what I've learned here and go and do my own thing with it? Or do I come back and say, he and I are supposed to be playing together? Yeah. And so I think that was a crucial moment as I decided, and here's something the film doesn't have. At one point, the year before this all happened, some guy had seen me playing, and he'd come up in Harlem, and he'd come up and he'd hug me basically, and took something from around his neck, and it was a African National Congress medallion, woven black and green leather, and he said, "You wear this. You've earned this. When you're in Harlem, you wear this." Well, wow. I took it home. I'm not the kind of guy who's going to say, "Hey, you know,
just rock that every day."
Yeah, I'm a slave with all this.
You could have.
You could have got away with it.
You could have got away. Yeah.
Here's what's funny.
You earned it, Adam.
It had been hanging at home, and when I got ready to go back down to Harlem, after those guys had hassled me, I was anxious, and you know what I did? I took it, put it underneath.
Put it on.
Ah, there you go.
And I thought, you know, people talk about mojo and all that hoodoo, but magic. When you need a little magic,
especially
Well,
in a
it's almost
situation
like
that.
a talisman.
A
or
talisman.
Yeah,
You
it's like
take if somebody's
Yeah.
given you a gift
Yeah.
that might have, it's strange. You know, it seems strange
Yeah,
to me, but I
that's
completely
interesting.
get why I would feel the need to do
Definitely.
that. So eventually, that faded, and then on the way up. So what's the? I don't know what the
What's
big
the
moment
point
is.
for you? What
What's
would you say in
what's
the
moment
doc?
for you?
Well, there are 2 points. Well, I think it's interesting, and this might not be a little bit off subject, but that what's going on now racially in the United States is sort of a second wave, you would say.
No
And so
doubt,
I thought
yeah.
that the film coming out right now, you know, is I hope
Great timing with it.
Great timing for it. Yeah,
Definitely.
The other thing for me was, you know, I waited this film out in a lot of ways. I mean, a lot of people used to ask me, including Adam,
When's it coming? When's it coming?
when are you finishing this movie? But
He'll be dead before.
yeah.
Well, I was honestly concerned because I wasn't sure
Yeah.
what his health was at a certain point.
he
That if
made
he
it.
was,
Scott got
thankfully,
it.
he's still here. Yeah.
Sterling was there for the opening.
Yeah.
You know, Sterling and I had, developed a relationship. Not, of course, not as deep as these guys, but you know, I did have a relationship. I think because we're all musicians.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that there was something about that. He took me in like he took Adam in some ways, and I felt that since he had given me so much of himself, I know myself that if I was in the situation that he was in the sort of center of the movie, that I probably would not let anyone shoot me. And Adam was very protective of him as well, but he did invite me down, and I went down there and captured all the stuff of his low point.
Yeah.
Low point was.
But I felt that after that since he had opened up his life to me, that I owed it to him to wait it out. And when he started, I remember around 2006, 2007, I was like, I'm just going to wrap this up because I don't think anything's going to happen. And then he started magically. Like
and we kind of went back with. Film, and each of us seemed to have a heart attack, which is kind of strange. The guy who helped, T.C. Carr, helped him on his comeback trail. I'm fine now, but I had a weird kind of thing in the spring of 2000. I was going down to see him. Scott had found him, and it ended up setting me back 2 years. I didn't see him until the summer of 2002, I believe, or something like that. Anyway, it took
might have been a little earlier.
might have been a little
than
earlier than that. But I was supposed to go down and see him, and so I think that was a moment when it's like it's just gone.
There's a lot of derailment.
A lot of derailment.
Yeah.
Then we had a kind of comeback. We had a kind of comeback trail thing, the rebirth of the blues thing that happened in Gulfport. There was a sort of early moment. But it was also clear he could no longer play the percussion.
Right.
And we tried to play a couple of gigs like that. I brought him to Oxford at one point in 2005, I think. And we got in the drummer. So I think Dave coming along, the hidden, and it's dedicated to Dave. We call him Dave on drums.
They called him the third member of the duo.
Yeah, Satan and Adam with Dave on drums.
Yeah,
and that enabled us to go out, begin to play festivals.
Right.
We had a kind of limited festival appearance thing in 2007, 8, 9. And, well, here's a moment that doesn't show up in the film, but that's a really important moment. I began to play percussion myself. Did not ever envy him playing that. But I, through a complicated thing, ended up becoming kind of a one-man band. And did some of that in 2010, recorded an album and other things. Dave died. His liver was bad. And he ended up dying. And somebody called us, a woman called me and said, "You played our wedding." Now, how many weddings do you think a rough-edged blues duo like Satan and Adam played? I think like 3.
Satan played a wedding.
Wow.
She goes,
think about that.
"You played our wedding 20 years ago."
Where was this?
Well, somewhere in the Northeast. And she said, I'm living in Mississippi, and he's like living in Florida. And she says, "I'd like to fly you guys to New York to play for a 20th anniversary because it's going to blow my husband away. I want to give him a special party." And Dave had died the week before. And I said, "Lady."
There's no way.
And then I thought, so you talk about fate. And I thought, she's willing to fly, like, we don't know. Like, this could be the end of Satan and Adam. With Dave gone, that's it. And then I thought, and this was a crucial moment. Not in the film, but it's a crucial moment in the act. I thought, but you're going to fly us, you put us up in a hotel, you pay us. It's like a paid rehearsal. We can see if it'll work.
Sure.
And I said, I think we can do this. And so we did, and it worked. As a duo. So we're one of these, we're a very weird duo in which it begins with a guitar player who also plays percussion with a harmonica sideman, and then now it's like a harmonica player also plays percussion with the guitar player. It's the percussion keeping function kind of moved from him to me. The sound, though, in a weird way. And so I'm not the player he was on percussion, but the sound is still the sound because the harmonica, the groove.
He taught you.
Distinctive groove, and then, of course, his vocals.
All that time just listening to him and being in his presence, and you picked up some stuff along the way.
Well, and being in his presence while he was becoming a one-man band in a much more profound way, he would talk about. So I got a sense of process. And so it really taught me, as I began to do that, I would hear his voice saying basically, just like, give it time. It'll, bit by bit, your body will figure it out. And so that was, that kind of, those mentoring moments are really important.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
when you think about these guys in terms of music history and thinking about their impact, how would you describe it?
Wow, I mean, in the beginning, I'd said that I saw them as an allegory for American music. It was a very pithy kind of comment, but I did because American music was this combination of these black and white and many others. But I kind of feel like there have been a lot of blues duos, and I'm forgetting one, but for me, it's the one-man band nature of Sterling's playing that I feel like should get more attention. I've always, I know you have, his ability to do that, and then the fact that and the fact that Adam can come along and play with that. That's a very as a musician, it's very complicated to sort of find your place in that sound. And so I feel like, although on one hand I want to say that he's the greatest one-man band ever and should be celebrated for it, we have Adam here too, so we could say that he's the greatest one-man band, and Adam would be the most amazing one-man band accompanying this, I guess would be the point.
I played a lot of harp. He did not mind me being loud. He did not want me to step on his vocals.
No, but he also played he played on the old like 70s style where he would go off in these like, one song would be like 15 minutes, maybe longer.
Which I realized
and he had to connect with that.
Yeah.
That's hard. That's constant improv.
Why are you playing the song so damn long? 15 minutes, man.
Well, someone asked me
because he grew up in a church in Mississippi, and it was a church. That's a church approach, which took me years to understand. That like I had the wrong idea. It's like he would get a vibe, he would get the feeling going, and then once you got that, why would you stop?
Right.
And it took me. I felt that, but I didn't. I still thought you should play a song and then play the next song. And he was like making music.
Yeah.
That's an important. So there was a lot of learning that went on between him and me. Mostly me learning from him. Let's just say.
I think it's really fascinating how this one person impacted both of you in such profound ways. For you, it changed your whole life.
Yeah.
And for you, it was a huge chunk of your life that you sunk into this movie.
You know, it's funny. Someone asked me a question musically that was similar, and they said, I told them, I said, when you're improving, you know, when you're playing and you're doing a solo, it's a commitment. You commit, and Adam can speak to this, you know. And I always was amazed by Adam because once Sterling would nod to him and go, okay, go ahead. When you commit to a solo, there's no retreating. Do you know what I mean? Once you put yourself out there, you blow those few notes, the audience is waiting, where are you going to take me? You know, where are you going to take me? And then I was thinking about it, and my situation with them is very similar. Once I committed to the thing,
you're in.
I'm in, and I'm a musician too, and I know that feeling. I have soloed. I've actually done bad solos where it's like you go in and you just
like, where am I going?
You ruin it, And I learned though over time that it just takes time, and it's just like what Sterling had said. Is just keep it, just relax and set yourself in the moment, and it will come. And I think back, and I only realized this is like 2 days ago I had this interview. That's kind of what I did in some ways. I just, you know, I mean, I was protective of Sterling in the sense that I didn't want to see him on camera. I wanted to see him come to life again, and he did. And but I also felt like I learned something from just soloing as a musician. Just like stick with it, relax, let things happen. Yeah.
There's something else that occurs to me that for people who are just getting a sense that they know that there's this film called Satan and Adam, they may be saying, wait a minute, it's a blues act. What's with the name?
Yeah.
Why Satan and Adam? Like, why, and Satan, that first of all, doesn't sound like a blues act, right? And people told us that more than once.
Sounds like a biblical lesson.
And the second thing somebody might assume, and I've had this once or twice, somebody said, why did you call him Satan? Why? That black man, why did you? I said, I didn't call him that. He was calling himself that when I ran into him.
That's who he was at that point in his life.
And so I did it. The name Satan and Adam came into being. I had to call our demo something.
Right.
I literally did not know what to call it, and I called it Satan and Adam. I mean, that sort of made sense. And then you're committed, right? But I think the film does a good job of helping you understand that he had a kind of breakdown earlier when his girlfriend, his wife, died. And you have a photo of her, which I hadn't seen until I saw the film, and that kind of put him over a barrel. He basically became an alcoholic and had a kind of conversion experience in which I guess his childhood problem with the church, you know, he got kind of whipped for playing the music. His parents were religious people and didn't like him playing the devil's music. But I think later on that kind of came back to him, and he said, I was reborn and I knew who I was, and so I became Satan or Mr. Satan. But it was not. The film jokes about it. I say, you know, it's not as though he's torturing puppies. Satanist. He's not a Satanist at all. It was he knew the Bible really well. He'd come up in a religious family. He would say, I speak for myself. He would say, Jesus always has somebody talking for him, but I'm speak for myself. I'm right here. Where's Jesus? So he had that kind of antagonism towards organized religion. He thought that ministers were, you know, money grubbing and did not help the real street people. It's like you had to be of a certain level to even walk in a church. He was ministering to the people in Harlem who didn't have even that.
Right, the grace that he was extending to other people.
Exactly.
You could see that for sure.
And he would absolutely draw a circle around the space we were in, and everybody was invited in. And you see him hugging I know her as Miss Harisha, Mr. Marvin. I mean, these were all people who kind of hung out around us. And they were sometimes sort of down and out. He'd give them money. The money that kind of came in the money bucket would be his. That was his change. That was his alms. That was his collection plate. And then he'd give it out to people.
That was a big deal to me. Yeah, that was a big deal to me in the film because it's not just a music documentary where you meet these two characters and you're like, oh, where do they come from when they play this kind of music? The music had another level of meaning beyond just listening to it, beyond playing and making money from it, beyond the pursuit of fame for the music. It had this social, almost egalitarian, on the street ministry that Adam became a part of. That was
drawn into it.
Music at that level is a completely different thing for me, and that's what was interesting to me when I was making the documentary, because it's just not a straight music doc. There's a lot more involved, and that's really what I wanted to get out, because this whole situation speaks so much of so many cultural situations that we deal with in the United States.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking one more thing, which
Sure,
is
go
people
for it.
sometimes when they hear the word blues, they think sad. But the thing about him is his take on the blues was joyous, and it was incredibly energetic. And so for me, the blues is always, it summons up that life force. And so I had an image in my head of sort of what it was like to be playing there. It wasn't just that where he was giving money to people, but it was also that those guys who hung out around us, he was theirs.
Yeah.
It's like if you had nothing else, you had this guy, and he's right there with you and for you, and he's going to give you money, but he's also the energy and the life that he was giving off, I think, made everybody happier.
Yeah.
You know, and so the fact that there was a crowd and that was sort of wandering by, it wasn't incidental. And in summer Saturdays, we would sometimes have a big crowd and play, you know, I Feel Good and do those things. We had a guy who used to sit in, Mr. Gantz, who's in the poster, going like this. He's a guy who would sit in occasionally. So
and I remember when cutting the film was that I was constantly fascinated by the idea while I was editing that this small little act that didn't want they didn't look for fame, they didn't look for an agent. I mean, in the beginning,
right? And then
the
all
small little street corner, but the world, exactly, the world comes in. U2, you know, there were others. There were news people that came out,
talent agents, news people.
Yeah, but they weren't seeking it,
right.
and so but this concept to me of this tiny little idea, it actually represents something bigger, and that's what I hope because you know, when you're doing a feature film, you got a lot of time, you know, and I hope that it would. I was trying to make it sort of this small moment expand to something, you know, more poignant. You know?
And countercultural today, because you guys weren't looking for fame when so many people are today, and just your focus on the music. It was pure and it was beautiful, and it was an amazing documentary.
Thanks,
so, guys, why don't you tell everybody when they can check it out?
When can they check it out?
Tonight.
Yeah.
In
theaters.
So it's the Village East Theater in New York, and it's going to be in L.A. next week.
Yes, next week in L.A. April 19th.
Satan and Adam Doc, Satan and Adam Film. What's the website?
Oh, it's satanandadamfilm.com.
Okay, Satan and Adam Film.
And all the screening dates and times and all that are on there.
The music of Satan and Adam it can be found on iTunes, obviously, that kind of, and Amazon. And there's a book that I wrote, if you're interested in the part of the story that goes till 1998 when the book was published. It's called Mr. Satan's Apprentice, and it's still out there on the University of Minnesota Press.
Good deal. Why don't you take us out with a little harmonica here to close things out?
How about a little bit of a song that I kind of dreamed up?
Sure, let's see it.
Called Thunky Thing.
Okay.
It doesn't really sound like blues. So we used to do this together. It has a breakaway part. Do I have time to play?
Yeah, come on now, keep going. No one else has ever done this before. Let's keep it rolling.
You know, many years after I came up with that, I thought, God, it's like Sanford and Son turned inside out. Weird.
There you have it.
Thunky Thing.
A very unique edition to Sit Down. Scott, Adam, thanks so much. We'll see you next time here on CBS Local.